Assets, one of the five major accounts in accounting. We have five major accounts: assets, liabilities, owner's equity, income or revenue, and expenses. I will first discuss about the assets. Assets are the resources owned and controlled by the firm. We have two classifications of assets. Classification based on physical nature, and number two, classification based on term or useful life. When we say classification based on physical nature, there are also two types: tangible assets and intangible assets. Tangible assets are physical assets. These are assets that can be touched, can be seen. Examples are cash or building. Intangible assets are assets that are non-physical assets. So meaning these are assets that cannot be seen, cannot be touched. Examples are patents and trademarks. When we say classification based on term or useful life, we have two kinds also: the current assets and the non-current assets. Current assets are the assets that can be realized, meaning can be collected, can be sold, can be used up 1 year after year and date. These are the assets that can be collected, sold, and used up within 1 year. Examples are cash and supplies. While the non-current assets are assets that cannot be realized, meaning it cannot be collected, it cannot be sold, it cannot be used up within 1 year after year end date. So these are assets that are collected, that can be collected, that can be sold, that can be used up more than a year. Examples are equipment and building. So we will talk now about the classification based on term and useful life. Again, we have two types of it: the current assets and the non-current assets. So these are current assets are the assets that can be realized, can be collected, can be sold, can be used up 1 year after year end date. So within a year, these assets can be used up, can be collected, and can be sold. Here are the current assets: cash, accounts receivable, notes receivable, inventories, supplies, prepaid expenses, accrued income, and short-term investments. Non-current assets, again, are the assets that cannot be realized, cannot be collected, cannot be sold, cannot be used up within a year. So it can be used, it can be sold, it can be collected 1 year or more than a year. The non-current assets are number one, the property, plant, and equipment. Number two, long-term investments. And number three, intangible assets. So now let's first talk about the current assets. Let's define those current assets that I have given during the previous slide. So let's define cash. Cash, it is the money on hand or in banks and other items considered as medium of exchange in business transactions. Number two, accounts receivable. Accounts receivable are amounts due from customers arising from credit sales or credit services. So these are the amounts. Ito yung mga amount na makokolekta mo from the customers that arise from the sales or services you've rendered to the customer. Number 3, notes receivable. These are amounts due from clients supported by promissory notes. So just like accounts receivable, these are also amounts to be received by the company that are due from clients. But this kind of amount or receivable is supported by promissory notes. Number 4, inventories. These are assets held for resale. So these are the products or items or goods that you sell. Number 5, supplies. These are items purchased by an enterprise which are unused as of the reporting date. So supplies, ito yung mga items na binili ng company and after the reporting period or as of the reporting date, ito yung mga hindi nagamit like kung office supplies like bond paper, ink, what else? What supplies? Let's say packaging supplies and any other supplies used by the company. Number 6, prepaid expenses. These are expenses paid in advance. They are assets at the time of payment and become expenses through the passage of time. So when we say prepaid expenses, kaya nga siya prepaid, parang prepaid SIM card. Prepaid expenses, to yung mga expenses na binayaran ng company in advance. Like prepaid rent, 'di ba? There are instances that the lessor requires the lessee to pay a deposit, a rent deposit and rent advance. So yun yung mga yun yung example ng prepaid expense. Expense siya pero binayaran siya in advance. Kaya siya prepaid expense. So kino-consider siya na assets at the time of payment. Tapos nagiging expenses na siya kapag na-use up na siya, nagamit na siya. Number 7, accrued income. It is a money that's been earned but has yet to be received. So ito yung na-earn na yung money, kinita na yung money, kinita na yung pera, pero hindi mo pa nare-receive yung bayad. Accrued income. Income mo na siya, but you did not receive any amount yet. So that is considered as accrued income. Number 8, short-term investments. These are the investments made by the company that are intended to be sold immediately. Example is trading securities. Again, ito yung mga investments na nag-invest yung company pero intention is ibenta rin ito agad. Kaya nga siya short term, maigsian lang. It's less than a year lang. Example is trading securities. What is trading securities? These refer to debt and equity investments that are purchased with the intent of selling them within a short period of time, usually less than 1 year. These are considered short-term assets. So ito yung mga debt and equity investments na binibili ng company pero after a while, less than a year, ibebenta niya rin yon. Alright, so we are done with the current assets. Now we will proceed to the non-current assets. Number 1, property, plant, and equipment, or in short, the PPE. These are long-lived assets which have been acquired for use in operations. When we say long-lived assets, matagal siyang magagamit, tatagal siya, magagamit siya ng pangmatagalan. No, binili ito ng company to use during the operations of the business. So examples of the PPE or the property, plant and equipment are the following. The first one is land. Okay? The first one is land. This is defined as the ground the company uses for business operations. It includes ground on which the company locates its headquarters or land used for outside storage space or as a parking lot. Next, we have here the building. Building, this is a fixed asset account that contains the carrying amount of the buildings owned by an entity. So building can be used for more than a year. So this is considered as long-lived asset. Equipment and machineries. Equipment and machinery, sometimes they are kept in separate accounts. So equipment and machinery are those major tools and implements used in the operation of the business. For a service company, pag ang kumpanya ay service company, this can include computers, no? Computers, copiers, telephone systems, and any electronic gear. But for a manufacturing company, they include such as drill presses, lathe machine or latte machines, sanders, and other large tools. Furnitures and fixtures. Yan. So these are larger items of movable equipment that are used to furnish an office. Examples are bookcases, chairs, desks, filing cabinets, and tables. So those four are considered as the non-current assets because they can be used up for a long time. Land, building, equipment and machineries, and furnitures and fixtures. Number two, long-term investments. These are the investments made by the company for long-term purposes. So kung merong short-term investment, meron ding long-term investments. Number three, intangible assets. These are assets without a physical substance. Wala siyang physical substance kasi hindi mo siya nakikita, hindi mo siya nahahawakan. Examples include patents, trademark, franchise, and copyright. So let's define them. The first one is patents. It is an official document that gives a person or company the right to be the only one that makes or sells a product for a certain period of time. So ito ay dokumento na nagbibigay ng karapatan sa isang tao o isang kumpanya na siya lang ang may karapatang magbenta o gumawa na itong produkto na to for a certain period of time. Okay? Next, trademark. This is something such as a word that identifies a particular company's product and cannot be used by another company without permission. So ito yung isang bagay na nakakapag-identify dito sa isang particular na product ng company at hindi pwedeng gamitin ng ibang company nang walang permission of this particular company. Like Banco de Oro, their trademark is we find ways. Sa SM naman, SM Corporation, they have this trademark, we've got it all for you, right? Next is franchise. Franchise, this is the right to sell or a company's goods or services in a particular a business that is given such a right. Okay, ito naman yung karapatan na magbenta nitong company's goods or service in a particular na like yung mga Jollibee, no? Pina-franchise 'yan. If you want to franchise a Jollibee, so ang tawag doon, makakapagbenta ka na ng mga Jollibee products, Jollibee goods because isa ka sa mga franchisee. Okay, next is copyright. Copyright, this is the legal right to be the only one to reproduce, to public, and sell a book, music recording, etc. for a certain period of time. Ayan, meron kang legal right na magpadamihin like libro, like books. Meron yan copyright. So, when you are given a right or a legal right to reproduce, to make it public, and to sell a book, so yun yung tinatawag na copyright. Like musical recording, di ba minsan, when you use the music from downloaded from YouTube, then pag-upload mo sa Facebook or any other application, sasabihin sa'yo, ang tawag dito, partially muted yung iyong video. Kasi nga, may copyright siya. Okay? So, yon. So, that would be all about assets. Thank you for watching.